Good evening, dear friends.
Good evening.
Another Monday, and we are together at the 26th video of our series. And next month, it will be 8th anniversary of the Divine Order and the Universe's publication. We had started to share what we learnt from the knowledge in this book with the public 8 years ago. However, the depth, expression and meaning what we have been sharing changed in the meantime, because what were only sentences and seemingly very far away events back then became the preliminary events of the knowledge about the end of this world cycle mentioned in this book. So, each of us is personally experiencing the initial effects in our body, in our life. All these earthquakes, severe weather events, pandemics will continue by increasing their intensity. Therefore, the difference between the ones who know and the ones who don't know becomes explicit in their approach to such events. What do you think?
I think, to be prepared is the most important. And what I mean is by preparation is written in this book. I read. They will acquire the possibilities of preparing themselves for the great day to come with ease, heartfelt peace and even joy. Yet, if there are points we are missing or not prepared for, or there are points that still give us pangs of conscience, or if the talents and abilities we had to develop in accordance with the life plan still aren't developed, and because our being will be anxious about these, then those moments and events will be troubling or suffering. I mean, to make us hasten our preparations, the frequency of the events or combinations of events will increase. When we talk about the pace of time is quickening, it is also related to the fast communication we now have today. We are under the constant bombardment of news. Yes, maybe we cannot go out of our houses, but we get the information about the other end of the world right away, and either our emotions get activated or we act upon these. And we talk about more intense versions of such events and such news in the next 50 years. And we will live through events that become destined for us, sometimes with strong steps, sometimes by becoming dragged or swept.
As you read this sentence from the book, I remember that in those related passages, the book also states the freedom and salvation for the one who prepared themselves with knowledge. But I noticed that some people understand this as if the ones who know will be excluded or protected from such suffering events and times. They think nothing will harm them. However, the book states it clearly, the only thing that will save us is our conscience. Yes, let's continue reading from the point we stopped last week. After this knowledge, the expression of the embodiment of human being should be understood in this wider meaning and should not be thought to be in a narrow frame such as the concept of incarnation, which means entrance in the flesh. The term of incarnation may be used for simpler beings which are consigned to connect into cells by force. However, it is not true for a human being. Therefore, the relation of a man with a body occurs in the form of its governance upon the magnetic field of its brain cells and sending out its influences via this vehicle throughout its organism. And this is ensured by a major part of the influences that are sent out from that perceptual point we have mentioned to the body. And a small part of its influences always exist, more or less freely, in that point outside of the body.
This passage summarizes what we read in the last 3 weeks. And the book makes a certain statement here in regard to what we generally understand or believe or assume when we talk about incarnation. After reading this, we are expected to change these previous understandings, beliefs, or assumptions for the human being. This can only be thought for the simpler beings which are consigned to connect into cells by force. But for the human beings, it is out of question.
Yes. We know that all those experiences and information from those past lives which is stored in the subconscious and after going through the accounting in the spatium phase, that become the essential knowledge is accumulated in that perceptual point of gathering, which is the being, and then, reflected to the spirit as an influence. And again, we must remember that the 1/8 or 7/8 of the being's energy mentioned here is only symbolic expressions, and there are not separations like the subconscious or superconsciousness. We had discussed last week that these so-called parts are actually fields of functions. And in this passage, we read again that a major part of the influences from that perceptual point are sent to the body. And a small part of its influences always exists, relatively free, in that point outside of the body. Again, I'd like to remind our friends, especially the newcomers, that if they watch our previous videos back to back, they will understand such passages with ease. Alright, let's continue reading. Influences in the body render all physical, physiological, biological and psychological functions of the body, under the control of the being governing the body and in accordance with the sublime evolutionary necessities. Here, nothing impedes, even slightly. The functions of these influences are not separate from the general function of the universe. They are realized in the great harmony of it and cannot digress from this harmony. After all, the divine order has arranged all states and situations of the whole universe and connected it to such an ordered mechanism that in spite of their endless appearances, the events of the universe flow away as a single procession. For the ones who can see this truth, a single body and the whole universe are two inseparable mechanisms.
Here, the plan mentions the divine harmony which it will strongly underline towards its end. Well, we are a whole as human body, yet there are the billions of cells, various organs with vital functions, organizations within it. We consider all of these as a whole, not cell by cell, molecule by molecule. And from the perspective of a plan of duty that governs our planet or the solar system, each particle making up this planet or the solar system is seen as a whole. And only within a harmony, such complex bodies can be governed. However, despite the fact that we are a part of this complex whole, we assume ourselves as distinct, as if the rest of the universe has nothing to do with our life, our body. But in this passage, we read that a single body and the whole universe are two inseparable mechanisms, but this can be seen like this only by the ones who see this truth. Just like the all influences branching out in the universe, all influences branching out in our body are not separate but a whole. And so far, we read in many passages that nothing happens, occurs or emerges outside of this divine harmony. There is no existence other than this harmony. And the book explains this to us by reducing it to our body level. All physical, physiological, biological and psychological functions of our body are under the control of our being, and in accordance with the sublime evolutionary necessities. The functions of these influences are not separate from the general function of the universe. And the events of the universe flow away as a single procession. Even though we see ourselves as separate, distinct, we are still a part of this single procession.
This passage brought out this image in my mind. The ship of humanity is indeed sailing in its true route as navigated by the divine system. And the route has towards the plan of love and then, towards the plan of duty. Now, within this ship, there are passengers who walks forward and advance. There are passengers who walk backwards. There are passengers walking downstairs. There are ones who walk to the bow to experience the intuitions and insights the breeze brings along. There are ones who hang out at the stern and still watching longingly the ports of past realities the ship had sailed from a while ago. There are passengers who isolated themselves within their cabins or berthing to remain within their own realities and to avoid contact with others in the ship. There are also passengers who cannot contain themselves and violate the boundaries of others. There are hard-working persons feeding coal to boilers to keep the engine running all the time. That is, from the points of view, the human condition seems like unfavorable, or the universe seems like in disharmony. Yet, when this ship gets closer to the plan of love, all passengers focus on leaving the ship with the joy of reaching their first destination and setting foot on it, because they will feel that this ship brought them to the place they need to be in and now they must leave this ship. They need to be free of this ship. Still, some passengers will leave the ship willingly, with the joy of reaching their destination, and the rest of the passengers will be forced to leave the ship because it is not seaworthy anymore, tattered and in pieces. So, we are going through such a period. The ship is in its route, accelerating, but the land is not sighted yet, but we know, we are getting closer to it each day. Yes, changing our perspective changes our outlook in life, be it personal or universal. And there is such a special influence within this sentence. In spite of their endless appearances, the events of the universe flow away as a single procession. And the following sentence. For the ones who can see this truth, a single body and the whole universe are two inseparable mechanisms. That's why we frequently mention that our body is a small universe in itself. As the saying goes, as above, so below. Of course, this is only an analogy and not the whole truth. Still, because this small universe is a part or a reflection of the greater universe, it longs to unite with it. Just as Rumi said, anyone pulled from a source longs to go back. This source is the super-universe truths. The longing is for becoming one with the divine harmony. Yes, when we are able to pull our gaze to the small and seemingly negative particulars about ourselves and our personal lives, we can see a larger picture. And what we do here, together with you, each Monday evening, is setting aside a time to get away from our hectic life, and to look at things within us and our life from a distance and from above so we can see the causes and effects behind the events. Some of our friends are asking more clarification about this phrase. A single body and the whole universe are two inseparable mechanisms.
Starting from first page of this book, we read that each part of the matter universe is meant to move, get developed and become more complex so each part can be in service to the spirit's needs for evolution. Yes, all parts are not at the same level of development and comprehension, but as they continue their development, they also influence other parts to become more developed. It looks like all of us, because we are also a part of the matter universe, are meant to influence each other for this purpose by getting more and more experienced, by widening our comprehensions and capacities. And if you remember, after a certain point in their evolution, spirits build bodies, which are the beings, from the matter at high-level energy. And these beings build bodies from cruder matter. And these crude matter bodies become more complex as the beings get developed more and more, and these levels of complexity reaches its apex in human bodies. And all these processes begin with the first influence that came from outside of our universe and lands at the amorphous matter, after getting filtered through the unitary. So, what makes us alive right now is an immense mechanism of influences. And what I experience is reflected back to my being, hence, to my spirit. That's why my body and the whole universe is closely connected.
And also, we had discussed the topic of organ-organizer relation in the previous weeks. The same strata exist throughout the matter universe and throughout our body. In this sense, my body and the whole universe is closely connected. We had given an example about the importance of a bolt for a plane to fly as intended. And the most obvious example is the working of nature around us. We can easily observe, if the snakes are killed in large numbers, the mice population rises, or vice versa. Each part of the ecological system is closely connected. There is a balance, an equilibrium. Yes, in the name of technological prowess, we harmed this balance badly, but nature heals itself and restores this equilibrium no matter what the consequences are for us humans. And I think, even this pandemic is a part of nature's ways to restore this balance. Let's continue reading. A great number of influences arrive in each particle of the universe, with all its beings. Human comprehension is unable to grasp even a particle of the influences complex that arrives in an object constituted by billions of particles, in a solar system constituted by billions of objects, in a nebula constituted by billions of solar systems, and in a cosmos constituted by innumerable nebulae, and finally, in the universal whole constituted again by innumerable realms besides the hydrogen reality. So, it is this unity of influences fulfilling the necessities of the divine order in the universe, establishing the harmony of universe within these necessities and embracing it that gathers together all motions and states and which explains the relation of spirits with universe and the imperativeness of the evolutionary flow.
Well, this passage provides us with the clarification our friends asked. We cannot grasp this immense complexity. The plan reminds us that after all those explanations, you may think that you understand how the universe works, but think again. Maybe, our friends watched those zoom out and zoom in animations in the social media that starts with a blade of grass or a human body for comparison. Let's share one of these, created by Daniel Oberschko. And considering the fact that what we can observe in the farthest point in the greater cosmos and the smallest point in the subatomic level is still a small part of the hydrogen cosmos. In our daily consciousness and perception, we cannot grasp the whole immensity of this, maybe only in dreams or imagination we can. Even then, this requires a very powerful imagination. We don't even have this wider perception about our bodies with its billions of cells, organs, systems. Can we do this? Can we imagine that each occurrence in the hydrogen cosmos is a flux of influence, that each influence are filtered through the unitary, the uppermost point of our universe and branched out in accordance with the needs of the spirits, that these influences bring out all interactions and occurrences among the all-celestial objects, galaxies, suns, stars, solar systems, planets, bodies on those spheres, the particles making up those bodies, the atoms making up those atoms. And imagine, if you can, that all of these are not by chance but continue to exist in an immense synthesis. Yes, it is almost impossible to understand, to comprehend, to imagine for us this immense branching out of the influences throughout the whole universe from the lowest levels to the uppermost levels, to respond the needs of the spirits. In the further pages, we will read about the unitary, the plan of duty. There is a journey ahead us, almost eternal. Yes, things are getting accelerated towards the end of this world cycle and we think that passing to the plan of love is the only purpose and we will stop there. Nope, the procession of evolution continues and there are many higher levels up ahead. Soon we will read about the cadres in duty, the organization systems. When we consider the influences involved in such cadres and organizations, it is impossible for our comprehension to grasp this immensity. I think we can only feel an immense awe in the face of such an order, within even a speck is taken into account without any injustice and disharmony, and experiences its destined existence within this immense divine order and harmony. And this is divine justice. In this passage, I clearly see the concept of divine justice because within this mechanism of influences, as it is destined for us to pass to plan of duty, it is also destined for the beings that are currently in lower stages to pass to human stage and continue on this eternal journey of evolution for reaching higher and higher destinations.
As humans, when we began to make discoveries about the hydrogen cosmos, at first, we had put ourselves at the center of everything. We had assumed that the sun, planets, stars revolving around us. However, as our comprehension widens, our gadgets get better, and with our telescopes, we discovered that this is not the case, and as we keep on discovering farther parts of space, we understood that we are, as humanity, on a planet, actually a speck. It is a humbling and eye-opening experience. Because as we discover and learn about the larger and smaller levels of our universe, our perception, comprehension becomes insufficient to grasp all of these levels. In a personal level, again, we may mistakenly assume that whole life must be revolving around us, everything begins and ends with us. Only if we can widen our perspective, we can understand that we are part of an immense system that is reflected in a smaller scale in the organization of our bodies and also in the communal organizations we humans can build. So, if we can gain this two-sided outlook about what we are but at the same time what we are not, we may begin to intuit what is meant in this passage. After all, the plan giving this knowledge knows it better and tells. Human comprehension is unable to grasp even a particle of the influences complex. And this divine order allows free will to the beings in ratio to their comprehension. Otherwise, this immense complexity couldn't work in harmony. Imagine if everything would be up to us humans. With our narrow comprehension and egoistical desires, nothing will be in an order, only chaos. So, yes, as you said, there is divine justice. And we also see this divine justice in action when we read about those 500 to 700 lifetimes we humans live through until we become developed enough in comprehension and conscience, even as semi-comprehendingly, to pass to higher developmentary stages. Another friend asks, after this description of a particle, should we shut up?
No, we can still discuss. What the book meant with this description is a scale. For example, compared to the solar system, we are just a particle. Yet, compared to our body, a cell in our body is just a particle. However, if our friend means that a particle is insignificant, I'd kindly suggest this friend to watch our previous videos where we discussed the duality unit. When initial motion begins in amorphous matter, the initial particle emerged as a duality unit. And within that speck of matter, there were already evolutionary values and primary values which will be inherent in the rest of the matter combinations that will emerge. That's why our cosmos is dualistic. And there are also particles with such high-level motion that they are out of the range of our perception. And there are also particles with cruder properties, and still, out of the range of our perception.
As you said, wherever or whichever level we look at in our universe, there is a material system which is based on a duality unit. The appearance of this particle may vary, but it is still a duality unit because the initial particle is constituted as such. Let's continue reading. We explained how various transitions and the acquisition of higher values of the matter combinations play a big role in the development of matter. Since the sole purpose of spirit's connection to universe is evolution, it becomes an obligation for the being serving the spirit to utilize these transitions and, because of this, to encounter innumerable matter combinations. Matter combinations have myriad forms and degrees in innumerable spheres. Besides the possibilities of a sphere, especially like the Earth sphere, which has particularly rich matter constitutions, the riches of possibilities belonging to matter combinations of innumerable spheres are the abundant materials beneficial to the evolution of spirits. However, for a being to benefit properly from this abundance of material, it is necessary for it to live in these innumerable combinations which are quite different and in different degrees from each other and, afterwards, to change them and be able to pass higher parts and to leave the matter combinations it has used in the lower part where it has been, otherwise, it cannot reach the higher combinations and remains in its simple state. However, the purpose of its application in these matter combinations is always actually to reach up and ensure the accomplishment of the evolutionary stages of the spirit with matter, which it serves. In this case, a being will first make a close connection with a body built out of the matter of a sphere according to its need, will prevail over each particle of it by its own subtle vibrations and then will use it in accordance with the needs of the spirit it is connected to. It will thus send the vibrations of events brought out by relations with crude matter combinations and relations between these combinations and other bodies in that sphere, via the channel of its comprehension, as we have mentioned. Mankind calls this connection of it with the body incarnation. After its work has finished in the body, the being does not need to stay there anymore, because this would be against its own evolution. Therefore, when its work is completed, the being will leave the body and enter into other matter combination possibilities. And a being, after utilizing all possibilities of a body, should engage the applications within the conditions of another and more superior matter complex, as well. However, for this state to be realized, it needs to separate from the conditions of former matter complexes, to leave its body, which mankind calls disincarnation or death.
In this passage, first we read the importance of acquiring higher values in the development of matter. Later, we read how the sphere we humans live in is rich in regard the possibilities of the matter constitutions provide the beings with rich possibilities for development. And again, the book states there are innumerable spheres with such rich possibilities for the beings, hence, the evolution of spirits that utilizing their beings to build bodies in such spheres. Yes, these bodies in other spheres may not be exactly similar to the stages our being goes through, namely, plant, animal and human bodies. However, the process of building a body, of utilizing it in accordance with the needs of the spirit, and when the possibilities of that body are exhausted, of leaving this body, this process is same for all beings and the bodies they build. And how this process begins? The being first makes a close connection with the body built from the matter of a sphere according to its need, then, the being will prevail over each particle of it by its own subtle vibrations, then the being will use it in accordance with the needs of the spirit it is connected to. Until when? Until its work is completed, then the being will leave this body and enter into other matter combination possibilities. Let me continue with the example of school. We use it frequently. A first-grader kid in the elementary school learns the alphabet, spelling, writing and reading. Now, this kid can deal with the 4 basic operations in mathematics, and next year, this kid is ready to become a second grader, to learn and experience more. If this kid insists to remain as a first grader, this is not useful for the kid. As in this simile, when we complete our final developmentary needs within the conditions we live in, the Earth sphere will be just like this for us. We exist here and now because of the needs of our being. Some of them are met but some of them are not met yet. So, now I am back to school simile. If we, instead of learning the 4 basic operations in mathematics properly, just wait for the class is over so we can have fun at the schoolyard, then the purpose of the curriculum is not useful for us. Again, we can think the first grader as a body are being built first, and in the second year of the school, because the possibilities are richer than the first year, our being builds another body to experience and learn more complex things. The 4 basic math operations the first body can deal with becomes the algebra equations with the next body, with the next school and further bodies, these become abstract mathematics etc. At the beginning of this book, we had read that all of our emotions, feelings, sensations, thoughts are of matter, everything we know and experience is of matter. And these have varying levels of complexities, so if we master an emotion it means that we master the matter appear as that emotion. It is also an indication that our comprehension is widening to include this ability and by this, we become more able to see the cause and effect relations behind this. Then as we become more able to do this, we can master more matter and can combine these in different ways.
We can see the developmental progress of our being when we compare the body of a Stone Age human with the body of a human of our times. These 2 bodies are very different in regard to capacity, consciousness, perception, relations with matter etc. So, our current bodies reached a completely different in the developmental level, but of course, this is different from the perspective of our being.
However, When seen from our human perspective, well, we know that at some levels we may be advanced, but at the level of conscientious acts, it looks like we have more miles to go. The realities we live in and live by are, I'll use this trendy term, our comfort zones. They are comfortable not because we are happy and healthy in this zone, no, it is because we don't question them. Yet, there are levels or realities out there with more and new questions. Still, if we question our reality, it suddenly transforms, then we are in a discomfort zone. That's why we don't like change. However, we live in an ever-changing universe. Its laws and rules are constant, but all combinations of matter in our universe occur because of changes in the value differentiation via interinfluencing of beings and bodies. We humans started with mastering crude matter, polished the stone, melted metal ores, sow seeds to harvest food. We were the first graders of the world school back then. We learnt about the world matter at crude levels and how to utilize it. Nowadays, with the advancement in sciences and technology, we are learning much subtler levels of world matter, discovering and understanding much further cause and effect chains behind appearances.
Because the world matter responds to this widening capacity of comprehension and imagination with more possibilities. That's why we can now produce microchips. Into smallest sized boards we can upload unbelievable amount of information. A question came. What is that another and more superior matter complex? With which matter this superior matter is compared? Of course, matter combinations for the being are not limited with the world matter or hydrogen cosmos. In the further parts of the book, about Plan of Love, we will read about a more subtle matter that can be formed by imagination and respond more easily to the evolutionary needs. So, there are so many versions of matter, subtler and more developed. It's higher levels which respond to the needs of the beings, but we cannot know or understand these other levels or dimensions of matter. And compared to the matter level we are in now, these are superior in this responding to the incoming influences. Yes, all influences are filtered through the unitary and branched out throughout the universe, but the responses matter given its cruder zones are different than the responses matter given its subtler zones. So, we can think superiority in this sense. And the flexibility of matter in revealing its possibilities goes hand in hand with the widening of the being's comprehension. These advance in tandem. As one advances, the other advances too. However, comes a point when the matter of a sphere and the body that is built on this sphere becomes insufficient for the being.
And this brings us to this last part of this passage we read. Death. But before that last part, we read in the second paragraph a neat explanation of life, or more correctly, incarnation. The being makes a close connection with a body built from the matter of a sphere, prevails over each particle of this body by its own subtle vibrations, then the being uses this body in accordance with the needs of the spirit it is connected to, because the being needs to send the vibrations of events brought out by relations with crude matter combinations and relations between these combinations and other bodies in that sphere. And these matter combinations or event combinations are so important that we will read many pages about these throughout the divine order and the universe. Because all those event combinations we humans live through, the connections between events, the cause and effect chains linking those events to each other have the utmost importance in the development and evolution. In this passage, the book once again explains the incarnation and discarnation, and from this point on, the plan assumes that we, readers, understood and comprehended this fact properly. When the body and the sphere that body is built in by the being becomes insufficient in responding the needs of the being leaves that body. In this eternal journey, let's say we first ride a car, then we reach a vast sea. We cannot continue with the car. And swimming to the other shore seems impossible. Then we leave the car behind and board a boat. Last week, I had promised to share a few examples from the earlier books of Mr. Ruhselman, describing the situations of some discarnate beings in the spatium. Because the passages we will read will be about death, I think it may be a good point to share these before we continue reading. What do you think?
Thank you, dear Ümit. Please share these examples.
All right, Mr. Ruhselman was a true metapsychical investigator and he had operated and recorded many spiritism sessions and later, he had discussed these in his articles and books. We are grateful for his hard work and diligence. Thanks to him, we have many examples to study the situation of the deceased people in the spatium, the confusion they go through, how their imagination works, etc. And we could understand the differences between the spatium period, for example, of a person who was a murderer or committed suicide and the spatium period of a person who was a candidate for completing the lifetimes in the world. So, his books are so rich with such observations. Yes, as in the passage we read, when the influences from the being cease, the human body dies. But what happens to the identity or the traces of perceptions of the body that died? This example I'd like to share is interesting in many ways, because the being giving the communiqué says that the medium was not properly received the vibrations regarding the feelings and observations. I will convey these to you, so there won't be missing points in the knowledge that must be given to you in this session. As the connection to the body begins to loosen, the patient gradually tries to forget about the life and things. A kind of indifference emerges in regard to these. For persons whose confusion period will be short, the ties to life begin to loosen a while before death. Such persons, either sick or healthy, feel within some preparation for this. If needed, such persons sometimes perceive or sometimes they are informed about this. This connection to the body cannot be loosened easily because the person is unaware that true life will begin after death. During death, as the person is leaving the flesh body and identity behind, many inner and outer words he speaks, but because of the medium situation today, we couldn't convey these vibrations to you. The dying phase is short and the deceased cannot know right away that he is now dead. He walks around the living ones. Of course, this is an imagination. He wonders why others cannot see him. He speaks to them but he is not heard because now the deceased has not 5 senses. He tries to find these senses but he cannot. We, the residents of the spiritual realm, call this true death because the deceased loses his identity, his sense of self. This is what we understand by death. And no one contacts with the deceased. He must be alone while going through this period. At that moment, whatever comes to his mind, he tries to assume this as identity. Eventually, the deceased notices that there is some substance within. That substance is neither a stone nor a tree, nor a person. That substance is the ability of comprehension that accumulated sufficient amount of power and which will be in his use until the end of the universe. Comprehension is a treasure that will evolve at the background of innumerable realms and limitless world, by adapting to all kinds of possibilities. All talents and abilities it will need throughout lifetimes is contained within this substance, and now, it will develop these as though growing a plant. Each facade of it will appear in a realm and all those substances intrinsic in its being will be adapted to the progress of universe within those realms. Because of this, human is not a simple creature. Behind a human, such a substance is hidden that it can embrace universes, that is ever ready to be developed throughout the universes. Then, Mr. Ruhselman says, we benefited from the observations given to us this evening, but the being says, I don't think it was that beneficial because it was short. Hopefully, it makes you think. We understand that the purpose of that session was allowing the medium to experience the lingering in the death agony, not in the worldly appearance but how it is experienced in the imagination of a dying person. Many feelings and observations had been conveyed through influences and vibrations sent to the medium. These parts of this session are very impressive. Okay, let me continue sharing the rest of the communiqué with you. The being says, suffering continues until the last moment of the connection to the body gets severed. It continues until this connection is completely ceased. Yet, as I have said, your medium couldn't receive the related vibrations and couldn't convey this to you properly. We observed that the confusion period was short. Such a short period of confusion is impossible. The state of confusion has stages. You understand this state of confusion as a state of not knowing what to do. However, the state of confusion sometimes can be a state of knowing what you do but still remain in it. There are such beings here that they think they are in a perfect state. However, because these beings couldn't adapt to the true order yet, they are considered as in a state of confusion. We can understand from this session and many other examples that the images and imagination in the Spechium period may be confusing in many ways. There are beings who remain unaware in an imaginary structure, built by the strongest impressions from the last lifetime. There are beings that become aware that this is imaginary but still cannot escape from this, and also, the Spechium period of the beings who are almost ready to complete the human stage. In short, the strongest beliefs, attitudes, regrets, feelings, emotions and thoughts from the lifetime of the deceased continue as imaginary structures in the confusion phase of the Spechium period. Despite the fact that these don't exist anymore, just a part of the past, all those emotions and feelings continue to be valid for the deceased as vivid, true images. For some, this is a torture, but for some, this is a peaceful accounting period by weighing all deeds of that last life in the scales of conscience.
Thank you, dear Ümit, for sharing these parts from the earlier books of Mr. Ruhselman. In the previous weeks, we had read this. At the initial stages of the Spechium, as we will later explain, all influences and connections of a being coming from above, below and the surroundings are severed, except the influences coming from its own spirit. It is only encircled within its own being and the impressions of its subconscious, especially belonging to its last life. And with the parts Ümit shared this evening, I think that this topic of the Spechium we read in the divine order and the universe is clearly understood. Well, there are many questions coming, and I notice that there are many newcomers among our dear friends. I'd like to remind them that we are in the 26th video of this reading and commentary series, so if they watch our previous videos, most of their questions will be answered. And there is a general demand for another Q&A video. So, maybe before you leave your place for the next commentator, we can dedicate an evening for replying the questions coming from our friends. Yes, next week we will read more passages about death, so please, if you can, read the next few pages from the book, and if some questions arise in your mind, write to us. We will try to do our best to reply your questions, of course, in accordance with the level of our current comprehension and understanding. We continue to learn, together with you, dear friends. All right, it is time to say good evening, wishing you all a good week. See you next week.
Good evening, everyone.